It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm very happy to open your very interesting series lecture. I saw that there's another colleague from Tel Aviv on the list, Dr. Vivian Sloan, and it's a pleasure to have both of us on your list. It's a real honor. So I'm happy to start. I will start by saying that I will touch upon some topics which are really interesting for me. I will try to tie up some loose ends, and I hope that you will follow and find it interesting. Some of the concepts I will be talking about were published recently, last year in Cambridge Archaeological Journal. In the citation you see at the bottom, so you can follow some of the ideas in this talk. But this talk will, of course, will be an expanded version of the issues to be dealt with. So I'll be talking mostly about humans, about early humans, about handexes, and about elephants, and I'll try to put all of these three components in one equation or in one story. But before we start, I need to start by few words of cautious. It will be mostly thinking out loud, this talk. It will be based on my own ontological journey, which had to do with reading, traveling, thinking, and so on. It will be, I promise, interpretive, speculative, and controversial, and I will be happy to tackle these issues with you after the talk, if you wish. And some of the thoughts were published, as you see at the bottom. Some are in the process of being hopefully published, and some, I guess, will never be published. So this is just some word of caution before we start. So I'll talk a bit about my way within the ontological turn. I used to be a grassroots archaeologist, excavating sites, working on lithics, publishing lithics, and so on. But maybe a decade ago, maybe 15 years ago, I became acquainted with what is called mostly in anthropology, the ontological turn, and I got a bit swept by that. So it changed a lot of my thinking, and I would like to put it out in the open so you'll know what I'm talking about, or at least what I mean when I'm referring to the ontological turn. In my perspective, or in my understanding, it has to do mostly with the departure from anthropocentric perspectives, meaning it is not all or only about humans. Second, it has to do with the adoption of a cosmocentric kind of perspective, as you will see. It has to do with the departure from the nature-culture divide. It has to do with an emphasis on relational epistemology, and with taking seriously indigenous worldviews. Mostly, it has to do with the understanding that indigenous hunter-gatherers, past and present, view the world differently than do weird societies, which is us, Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. So in order to try to get a glimpse with what happened in the Lower Paleolithic or in the past as a general, we need, at least I believe, we need to follow some aspects of this ontological turn, and I'll get back to that soon. Being a traditional guy, I usually open these talks with a short video just to get everyone in. This will do for a start. I'll talk a bit about my own ontological turn. It started with my work at Kesem Cave. I excavate Kesem Cave for the past 20 years or so, even more than 20 years. Kesem Cave is a late Lower Paleolithic site in Israel. I guess some of you are familiar with that. I went over the names just before I started, and I know that some people in the crowd that I know very well are well familiar with Kesem and with this context, but maybe others are not. So I'll say some words. People at Kesem Cave lived in the cave throughout 200,000 years, from 400,000 years before present until 200,000 years before present. This is the end of the late Lower Paleolithic in the Levant. It's a local cultural complex unique to the Levant, which demonstrate innovative cultural traits and maybe innovative biological traits as well. There are many biological and cultural changes, transformations evident in Kesem Cave. And while we were working at Kesem Cave, we realized that in order to understand what was going on, we have to go beyond, let's say, the regular data that we use. And one of the key elements in our view in understanding what went on at Kesem Cave is the absence of elephants. At Kesem Caves, there are no elephants. After in the Levant, in many archaeological sites throughout 1 million years, elephants were present. So we suggested a model in which elephants, or the disappearance of elephants, was the trigger for the changes that took place at Kesem Cave. So this is one aspect of my own turn, and the other part has to do with the study of bifaces or handexes, which I'm very fond of, but mostly with the study of handexes or bifaces made of elephant bones. This is a biface from a site in Italy, Fontana Ranuccio, which is made of an elephant limb bone fragments. It's a replica of the iconic flint bifaces, and these bone bifaces really triggered me and triggered my thinking, and brought me back to a book I read while I was a freshman and an early student, and the book is Bringing Home Animals. It's a book written by Adrian Tanner. He worked with the Inu in Labrador for many years, and he wrote the Bible in anthropology, dealing with human-animal relationships. And then I got lucky, and in a conference in Cambridge, I met Adrian Tanner, and we got into talking and a lot about his work and his book. And the talk ended with me asking him, "Will you take me there?" And he said, "Of course." And I had the pleasure of traveling with him to Labrador. It's about here at the end of Canada. And we spent some weeks in Labrador with the Inu that he studied, but I spent time mostly with Adrian Tanner, who knows a lot about the Inu and the life. And we spent some time at the tent of an Inu elder and leader, Elizabeth Penashua. I was lucky, and my elder daughter joined me as well. This is the one who's sitting on the chair near Adrian Tanner. And we spent a lot of time with Adrian and the Inu. And I think I got a better understanding of what is going on. And this contributed a lot to my own connection with the ontological turn. And I'll get back to that. So in Paleolithic archaeology, we usually divide between utilitarian or practical elements and what we call usually non-utilitarian elements. And we address some as functional and some as spiritual or as social. I want to put everything together and forget about this divide in the framework of thinking within the ontological turn. I'll just say clearly that, at least in my understanding, past and present hunter-gatherers were not just exploiting natural resources. Indigenous societies view the world in a unique way, as composed of other than human persons, capable of thinking, feeling, deciding, etc. In such a complex situation, multiple worlds exist in parallel, a world of humans, a world of animals, a world of stone, a world of mountains, a world of rivers, and so on. The human world is just one of many, and humans must live side by side by the other entities and pay them respect in order to ensure world order. This, in a nutshell, is what I understand about the way early humans might have perceived the world. Of course, it's a speculation, it's my thinking, it's my understanding, and you are welcome to think otherwise, of course. This kind of thinking within anthropology and within archaeology didn't happen in one moment. It has a kind of an evolution. It started with animism, thinking about animal spirits and so on, but very fast it moved to what is called new animism, mostly the concepts of other than human persons. And in the recent maybe 20 and 30 years, there's a concept of perspectivism or ontological perspectives, which are advocated by many scholars. Here you see 4 books which are central to this debate, and are written by 4 leading scholars of this field of study. Some of them are well known: Bruno Latour, Philippe Descola, Eduardo Viveros de Castro, and so on. So this is the basis for this line of thinking, and you are welcome to read these works. They are really, really fascinating and relevant in my opinion. So just to make myself clear, for those who are not familiar with the literature and those who adopt different views of the ontological term, and this is of course allowed, when I say ontology, I mean a theory about the world, the way the world is perceived by humans and the way humans perceive their place in the world. This is what I mean by the term ontology. When I use the term cosmology, I mostly mean a set of knowledge, beliefs, interpretations, and practices of a society or culture related to explanation about the origins and evolution of the universe, as well as the role and the meaning of human life and the world within the universe or cosmos. And if you ask me why this is relevant, I'll tell you that there are societies like the Maya and the Inca, which are much more recent, of course, which for them we are very well familiar with their ontology and their cosmology. And their cosmology, indigenous cosmology, usually has to do with an upper world, a middle world, and a lower world. And usually there are animals which are liminal elements that connects between the world and these worlds, and this is where animals or certain animals come into the picture. Every indigenous society, or even every society, has its own creation myths. May it be God, the Big Bang, a big turtle, a big snake, you name it. But every society has its creation myths, and most of its behavior is dictated by the creation myths they are following. I believe that people in the past had their creation myths as well, and these creation myths dictated their actions like in modern time. When we try to understand human behavior, we usually believe that it is dictated by the availability of resources, climate and the environment, technological, all kinds of capabilities, competition, conflict, and so on. And we use all kinds of methods to try to explain what happened in the past. But usually, again, this is all about humans and nothing but humans. These approaches do not explain fully what happened in the past. And I believe that the more cosmocentric approach might be helpful. We must understand or realize that people are not humans, are not rational. Humans are motivated by multiple factors, mostly by some sort of belief. People have a theory about the world and the way it operates. So why do we expect early humans to be only rational? Why do we examine past human behavior only in terms of efficiency, survival, and other rational criteria? When we come across evidence for non-rational or non-practical behavior, We call it sacred, symbolic, or ritual, and we don't explain this too much. We assume that in these cases, other considerations other than rational guided human behavior. Why assume such consideration acted only in extraordinary cases and not on a daily basis? I believe it happened on a daily basis. I'll give you an example that I met when I went to a conference, Neanderthal Art, in 2018 in Turin, Italy. This guy, Clive Gamble, is a native Australian, and he gave the example of this seashell bead necklace, which is made by his tribe and his people. And he made and presented this necklace. In archaeological terms, we would have interpreted this necklace and these beads as some kind of body decoration, some kind of personal identity, some kind of group identity, some kind of status marker, and so on. But for the Aborigines in New South Wales in Australia, this necklace has to do only with the coming of the fish. When the big fish are coming ashore, these beads are swept to the shore. And when indigenous Aborigines are expecting the fish, they wear these necklaces in order to get connected with the fish. So for them, it has a very specific meaning, which is nothing to do with the theories that we put together. So in order to try to understand these things, we need to put everything together, at least in my opinion. I'll give you another example of a stone. A stone is found at an archaeological site, and we are dealing with the Western archaeologist and an indigenous archaeologist. For a Western archaeologist, the question is, what is it? And he will see if it is an artifact, if it is shaped, if it has any useware or residue, and if it has nothing out of this, well, it is just a stone. For the indigenous archaeologist, the question will be, is it alive? And whether it is a non-human person, and in this case, it might be the most important element on site. So this is just two different views of the same thing in order to just to strengthen this kind of thinking and use some words better said than mine. I'll use the words of this scholar, which is also of indigenous origin, ancestry, Robin Val Kimmerer, and she presented the things beautifully in my mind. She said a landscape of streams and lakes, mountains and rich valleys, shared by thousands of species and plants and animals, is understood through the lens of the Western materialistic worldview as a wealth of ecosystem services or natural resources. In contrast, through the lens of traditional indigenous philosophy, the living world is understood not as a collection of exploitable resources, but as a set of relationships and responsibilities. And this is the time to let her speak for herself. I'll show you the second video. It's a bit longer. I like it a lot. Thank you very much for keeping up with me. I know that for some of you it might seem a bit strange, but I believe that at the end you will see how this might connect to what I'm trying to advocate. So let's move to some of the basic elements and some basic and personal premises. In my view, Paleolithic people starting about 2 million years ago experienced high energetic demands in terms of caloric intake, estimated at between 3,000 to 5,000 calories per day. I believe that the Paleolithic diet was based on the consumption of fat and protein, supplemented by vegetable food. Humans are limited in their physical ability to extract calories from protein. This is well known and is dictated by the limit of the liver to get rid of all the poisonous items in the meat. Natural vegetable foods, especially without the use of fire or prior to the use of fire, is unlikely to be sufficient to the daily caloric intake. Fat can be consumed unlimitedly. Fat is the densest energy source in nature. It provides 9 calories per gram at a minimal digestion cost, as opposed to to carbohydrates and protein, which provides only 4 calories per gram. Fat is digested to the extent of 95% or better. It's a carrier of vitamins and so on. And some people say it makes food palatable. Mega herbivores, and especially elephants, provide a unique combination of fat and meat, as well as extraordinary fat quantities and qualities. Throughout the Paleolithic period, elephants and mammoths remains are found at many archaeological sites in the Old and New Worlds. It is evident that early humans consumed proboscideans, fat, and meat for hundreds of thousands of years. And I will argue that elephants and mammoths played not only a nutritional role in the Paleolithic, but also constituted a major cosmological and ontological element, meaning it was very central to the world views and beliefs of these people. And I want to put an emphasis on fat and respect. Fat and respect, craving for fat, and treating prey animals with respect is a universal pattern in all indigenous societies, all hunting societies, and in my view, in the past as well. Usually when we try to understand human behavior in the past, we put a lot of component into the equation, but we hardly ever put these two in the equation, fat and respect. And I think this should be considered. And you see here two books which demonstrate this beautifully, one about the caribou and one about whales, about recent indigenous societies. And again, this is excellent reading material. So humans were sharing habitats with elephants and with other animal taxa. People were eating elephants, as I mentioned before, and mammoths, which are found in abundance in many Paleolithic sites in Israel and beyond. And why elephants and mammoths? Well, the answer is rather clear. Elephants and mammoths are an important source for calories for human consumptions and human heads to eat. They are the larger terrestrial animal. They weigh between 6 and 10 tons and even much more than that, which is 50, 80, 100 times than a deer. Elephants and mammoths have extra high caloric fat content. Half of the million calories within a single elephant or mammoth are within the fat. Elephant and mammoth retain a high body fat throughout the year. And they were available in the Old and New World for over 1 million years. So the question is not why, but why not, in my view, of course. I'll give you an example from a recent marvelous paper that had to do with mammoth resources for hominins, and I'll read only one line from the paper, and you're welcome to read it. They argue, not me, that I'm reading here. A medium-sized mammoth would have stored 1 million kilocalories as fat, providing clean energy for a hunting group of 12 to 24 individuals for approximately 9 to 18 days. Again, 12 to 24 individuals for 9 to 18 days, only the fat, while the consumption of various amount of meat would have extended this figure for some days. This is just to get you an idea about the amount of time people can sustain on a single proboscidean. And now we move to the third very short clip taking at the Congo Basin, where pygmies are still hunting elephants for meat and fat. I truly apologize for those who think these are not easy seen, and thank you for the attention. And I hope these pictures will ring a bell when I'll get to the end of my talk. So at many archaeological sites, handaxes were found, bifaces were found in association with elephant bones. This is the site of Geshem Not Yaakov in Israel. This is the site of Revadim, again in Israel, where we found some bone residue on a biface, which is associated with an elephant rib bones, which has cut marks. Again, we cannot claim that the cut marks were made by the biface, but the biface was found in association with the rib of an elephant bearing cut marks. So sometimes maybe correlation does mean causation. A few words about bifaces, and again, these are mostly my own view. I believe that the available functional, technological, and experimental evidence suggests that the primary use of Paleolithic bifaces was in processing animal carcasses. In some cases, there are examples of other tasks carried on, but it had to do mostly with working animal carcasses. The efficiency and suitability of handexes in cutting, defleshing, and dismembering carcasses, and in particular carcasses of large game taxa, was repeatedly suggested. Handexes were efficient tools in processing large carcasses, enabling the removal of large quantities of fat and meat and the separation of body parts in order to be manipulated and transported. The handaxe allowed the application of considerable force and leverage during cutting and dismembering, and its continuous and mostly curved and sharp working edge is ideal for massive and intensive meat and fat processing tasks. It can be resharpened and allowed for prolonged work of cutting. So in my view, Paleolithic handexes were mostly used in butchering large game. Of course, the toolkit was much more varied than that, and people were using all sorts of tools, including very small tools that we found alongside bifaces at the site of Revadim, for example. They were using tiny recycled flakes in order to carry surgical cuts, and these are from Kesem Cave. Again, very small cutting tools used alongside the big bifaces, and of course scrapers were used in working animal bones, animal carcasses, not only bifaces. Now I'll touch upon again the very intriguing aspects of bifaces made of elephant bones, which are considered as replicas of the iconic stone bifaces. So these are well published, and some points are worth of mention. Bone bifaces were manufactured mostly from elephant bones. Bone bifaces are present only at sites where stone bifaces are present as well. They always go together. And the hypothesis of shortage that led to the production of bone bifaces cannot be accepted, is discarded by most scholars. Recently, a year ago, there was a new publication of a 1.4 million years old bone biface here in the picture, which is made of a hippo bone, not an elephant bone, and it was most probably also used for practical practices. It was used for cutting meat, and it's a very nice paper. I wrote a reply to the paper suggesting that the fact that it was used doesn't negate it being also symbolic in nature, and you can read the debate between us, but it's a very nice debate, I believe. And I compared, as I will do later, the handaxe to the chopsticks, and we'll get to this a bit later. But before that, we'll get back to the Inu and some insights about the Inu from the book Bringing Home Animals by Adrian Tanner. So Adrian Tanner writes like that: a central attribute of the conduct of hunting is that game animals are persons and they must be respected. The rules of respect after the killing involve essentially taking care of all elements of the carcass and not allowing anything to be thoughtlessly discarded. Thus, blood and intestines are consumed, buried in the snow, or fed to the dogs. Bones are made into tools, hung in the trees, put in bone platforms, or put in a lake, and all uneaten meat is fed to the dogs or put in the fire. But more importantly, the more commonly held belief is that the inedible remains continue to be part of the species as a whole, and their proper treatment is a way of avoiding giving offense to the master of the species in question, thus enabling hunting to continue. This is about the Inu, but this had stricken my mind regarding this bone biface. So early humans were hunting proboscideans, were stripping them of meat and fat, and were breaking elephant limb bones, as you can see here, in order to extract the marrow. After that, some of the broken bone flakes of elephant limb bones were shaped into replicas of bifaces. And we suggested that the intimate physical contact between the hunters and the item made from the hunted animal provides humans with the perspective of the animal, and more specifically, that butchered elephant bones were purposefully selected in order to allow early humans to become elephants, to transform into elephants and experience the elephant's perspective and abilities. The elephant bone handaxe might also have constituted a token of appreciation and respect towards the elephants, aimed at maintaining the special relationships and the continuous presence of elephants that enable human existence and well-being. And I will push it only further just a bit. The connection between human and elephants is extraordinary. Humans are charmed by elephants for many reasons. Humans share many qualities with elephants, which are both physiological, social, behavioral, and cognitive conceptual. I guess you know some of these. In many indigenous societies, elephants are persons and persons are elephants. In many indigenous societies that still hunt elephants today, there are all kinds of practices and spirits play and rites that are being conducted before elephant hunting. And I guess some of you are familiar with the works of Jerome Lewis in the Congo Basin. And if you are not, you are welcome to read. It's a marvelous piece of literature. A few years ago, we tried to decipher, to give an interpretation for the Australian handaxe technological persistence, why it stayed for so long. And we suggested that the apparent stagnation or conservatism of the handaxes, while innovation occurred in other fields, is not because of a lack of innovative capacity, or not because early humans were not capable of making changes, but because of two reasons. Because of a well-grounded functional need processing of large herbivores, which gave human hunting societies an energetic security, as I mentioned before. And we suggested that in time, through psychological conformity and cultural conservatism, the handaxe became a social norm, and we actually compared it to the chopsticks in East Asia. This is just a demonstration of that, but we can skip that in order to get to the end on time. So my hypothesis is as follows, as you could realize, I guess. Early humans shared the world with large herbivores, were dependent on fat and meat for their successful adaptation and well-being, and had special relationships with animals that they depended upon. This has to do not only with elephants. I'm talking now on elephants, but it has to do with other animal taxa as well, and I will get to that in a bit. Lower Paleolithic handaxes, thus, in my opinion, acted on both the practical and cosmological and ontological spheres. As long as large herbivores were around, bifaces were used both in order to process these taxa and to ensure the continuation of the special relationships between the hunter and the hunted. Once large herbivores were no longer around, and at some point people stopped making bifaces, new tool types were adopted in order to process and keep different relationships with other animal taxa. This is, in a nutshell, our hypothesis. And in a paper published this year again, we try to test this hypothesis. We try to see if there is a kind of a correlation between technological persistency and prey availability. And we tested 5 cultural complexes throughout the world where data is available. And we try to see if there might be a connection between animal taxa and specific stone tools. And we try to see if there is a nexus between the disappearance of these central prey animals and with the technological change and the adoption of new tool types. And we found, we believe, evidence for that. And we suggested this circular scenario would start with an energetic necessity for prey rich in fat, protein, and marrow. And this necessity led to a development of designated stone tools for hunting and processing this specific animal taxa. Then this led to development of practical and ontological cosmological relationships between humans and this prey. But eventually there was a decline in this kind of prey. And the decline has to do mostly with human predation. And after this specific prey had declined, people moved to the next large size animal prey, became dependent on this kind of prey, developed a set of stone tools that was appropriate for the processing of this kind of prey and for the appreciation of this kind of prey, and vice versa, and vice versa, and vice versa. And this is only the beginning. I leave you with that. Thank you very much for the attention. And I believe that I'm almost on time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Barkai. That was really, really interesting. Would you like to stop sharing your screen now, and then we'll move on?
Absolutely. I just wanted to say that I'm very sorry that we cannot meet in person and talk and discuss. I don't like this kind of online meetings, but this is our reality. So I hope that in the future we could meet and discuss and over a beer or something like that. And I'll be happy to stop sharing. Just a minute. How do I do that? Stop share.
Great.
Okay, I succeeded.
There's a question in the chat already. It's from Walter, who says, are there any examples of societies being ontologically influenced by fishing? Again, I'm sorry. So Walter asked in the chat, are there any examples of societies being ontologically influenced by fishing? Absolutely. An ontological worldview has to do with every element in the cosmos, not only animals. And of course, there are many societies who are dependent on fish, and for them, fish are significant ontological and cosmological elements. But again, maybe for us humans, it is easy for some of us to accept this kind of relationships with living creatures. But if you accept the ontological line of thinking, it has to do not only with animals, but as I said before, it has to do with human relationships with stones, with tree, with water, with mountains, with caves, with everything. So fish are included, and there are some very nice examples. The best examples that can come to my mind is the Chumash Indians of California, which had special relationships with a special kind of a swordfish, which is found also in burials and in customs and so on. Okay, cool. Thank you. Does anyone else want to ask a question? Gopesh, you've got your hand up. Do you want to unmute?
First of all, thank you, Professor Barkai, for this wonderful, I will say, out-of-the-box lecture, in a way. So I have a couple of 2 points I wanted to ask. Firstly, talking about extra functional aspects of some toolkits, or particularly handaxe in nature. I remind reading paper by Cohn and Novel, where talk about handaxe as a tool of sexual selection. So what's your notion on that? And other thing is other side from Spain, Toralba and Ambrona, where we have a huge assemblage of mammoth or Proboscideans assemblages, but we don't see such signatures or use of elephant bones. Rather, putting these evidences of elephant or tools made of elephant bones out of opportunistic behavior or seeing them something more than else, how you think and how you tackle, because still the evidences are so scarce.
Well, I like Cohn's enlightened paper a lot, and I think it's provocative. It makes you think. It's one of the first papers that alert all kind of questions that were not dealt with before. And I give this as a mandatory reading for a introduction to prehistory class that I teach since the day it was published. So I don't say that I accept what they suggest, but I think it's a paper that makes you think, make you think out of the box, and I really appreciate this line of thinking. I think that we are far from truly understanding all aspects embedded within bifaces, handexes, but not only bifaces, handexes. I think these items could have multiple lines of meanings for early humans. Again, I believe that the basic element was their essential role in providing calories, but this role made people understand that they are dependent on this kind of stone tools, and of course it could evolve to sets of other kinds of meanings, and it could be embedded within social actions and so on. I'm not against it. I'm just saying that the core of this phenomena, in my opinion, that allowed it to continue for over 1.5 million years is its role in providing calories for humans, and all other things are extra. As for the scarcity of bone handexes, I fully agree. Bone handexes are not found at every site. I don't think that they were produced on every site. I think that they were produced on special occasions. I don't believe early humans hunted proboscideans not on a daily basis, not on a weekly basis, not on a monthly basis, maybe on a yearly basis. In my thinking, maybe it's like people who live in the Arctic and they have to hunt a whale before winter starts, and this whale keeps them alive for the whole winter. So I think that these episodes were anecdotal, were maybe once a year, maybe once in 2 years, maybe once they realized that they had to how should I put it, move the relationship with the elephant to a different level. Maybe when they witnessed a decline in elephant availability, they realized that they need to do something in order to restore elephants. So I'm not saying this was done on a daily basis, maybe not even on a regular basis. I think it was done when the need arose to do it. I know it's not a full answer, and I'm not in a position to provide full answers. As I said in the beginning, this is my own wild thinking, and I must admit I haven't thought of all the elements yet. It's only 10 years or 15 years of thinking, and I have some more years ahead of me. And if I find answers to all the questions now, I'll get bored. So thank you.
Thank you. So John, you've got your hand up. Do you want to go next? Yep. Well, Ron, mainly I want to say it's great to see you.
Hi, John.
I think,
Likewise.
hi, some of us will very much look forward to sharing an actual beer with you when the chance comes. So thanks very much for a very stimulating talk. I just want to hold up for a second. I don't know if you will see one of Tony Berlant's things that he called elephant head bifaces. And I think it's, I think you could even argue that they would fit into your picture if we accept them. I mean, they could be purely functional, but they're quite impressive. But to almost to tease you a little bit, what about hippos, the other big animals? Would you have any space for making hippos special?
Well, it's not me who's making these things. First, John, thanks for joining us and for talking, and we shared beers many times in the past in Israel and in different parts of the world, and I hope that we'll be able to do that in the future as well. I'll be happy if you can share with me the reference to these elephant bifaces that you were showing. I'm in a position of learning all the time, so I'm learning all the time about hippos. As I tried to mention in my talk, people were in the past, I believe, were fascinated by elephants, but actually consumed whatever was available, and people consumed hippos as well. But it seems that the emphasis on the modification of hippo bones was not as intense as in the case of elephants. I showed these items from Conso, who is that is a biface made on a hippo bone, but it's a sole example. In my belief, I fully accept the fact that hippos are as nutritious as elephants and provide people with almost as much calories as elephants. So I think that the question here is not about the nutrients, but maybe about the resemblance between human and elephants, which is not like the resemblance between human and hippos. As I briefly mentioned, and I have a paper about that. If you would like to read, I'll be happy to send it by mail to anyone who's interested. People in the past and in the present identify resemblance between human and elephants in many aspects, in social behavior, in raising up their pups, in all kind of mortuary behaviors. People say that the elephant brain is similar to the human brain in structure. Many aspects of elephants and humans are similar. I believe that these aspects of similarity didn't went unnoticed by people in the past. People in the past realized that elephants behave very much like humans. I believe that people were dependent on elephants not only as food items, but also as elements that make tracks in the forest and can be followed in order to track water and so on. So I believe that, like modern scientists, early humans did notice all these elements in elephants, and I think this was the reason why elephants were super appreciated by humans. But again, maybe it's my wild imagination again.
Okay, well, thank you, and thanks. We're all learning a lot, so thank you for all the references to Ran.
With pleasure.
Stephanie, you put your hand up next. Do you want to ask your question?
Thank you, and thank you, Ran, so much for what is genuinely a fascinating talk. It's a little outside of my wheelhouse, which is why I wanted to see if I could pick your brain to cast your mind a bit further back to the Pleistocene bone tools of Eastern Africa and wondering whether there's a correlation. Because with these earlier stone tools, alongside them, we do have instances of flaked bone. And I'm wondering if you think that this may be kind of the earliest stages of this particular culture. And then also just to throw some thoughts out, because you are kind of still thinking these things through, and I had a couple of thoughts about some of the other comments that people have made. The first is with regards to the scarcity of elephants specifically. Do you not think it may potentially also be linked to migratory routes? Because elephants both in Asia and Africa do migrate seasonally, and it may be correlated to a seasonal migration, and there is some significance. We know that with modern indigenous groups, seasonal migratory patterns are extremely important. So there may be some link there. And then as another thing, somebody who's tasted hippo, I can tell you that it's delicious, I hate to say, but from a calorific point, it's a brilliant meat because it's marbled. And so there's a huge fat content to it, and it's not separated like you have in a lot of other of your big mega herbivores. So just some thoughts. But yeah, I'd love to hear about your ideas regards the early Pleistocene bone tools, specifically from East Africa, not Southern Africa, they're very different, but the napped bone from East Africa.
Well, as you might have realized, I have no limits. And I pay a lot of respect to early humans, and I'm not only using the word respect just to do as a token of something. I believe that early humans were capable, were having intimate relationships with the cosmos and with the world that they were living in. And I also believe that they had the kind of understanding of what they are doing. I know this is a bit too much, and I know I cannot prove it, but I think that the proof is in the pudding. I mean, I believe that the proof is that early humans were able to survive millions of years successfully without hurting the environment, without having supermarkets, without having 7-Eleven, they knew what they were doing. They were basing it on trial and error and the transmission of knowledge. But I believe it was based on an intimate relationships with the surrounding and with an understanding that in order to ensure their well-being, they have to follow specific patterns of behavior. And in my opinion, it goes back to the time of early humans, and I wouldn't be surprised if there would be more and more evidence of that, if people will be willing to think this is possible. I mean, if our colleagues and ourselves would not think only in practical terms and in terms of efficiency and so on, and would be willing to consider some more non-conservative, out-of-the-box options, I believe we will learn more. And I'm optimistic. I believe that early humans were not only feeling their bellies, going to bed, waking up in the morning, feeling their bellies, going to bed. I think that they had relationships with everything surrounding them. I think they paid respect to everything. It is true that as you go back in time, there is a meager evidence for that, or might be less and less evidence survived. But I believe it is there, and I believe it is the case. I'm not saying that I can fully reconstruct what was going on. This is too much even for me. I can only suggest some hints. And again, it took me some years to figure out this kind of hypothesis regarding the bone bifaces. I mean, it struck me, but it took me years and years in order to gather all kind of information, read all kind of literature, try to understand how mindsets might have been working. And again, I know this is ambitious. I know this is maybe, I know that I have some colleagues that call this science fiction. And it's fine with me. I like science fiction. I don't think it's science fiction. I think maybe this is pushing the evidence a bit too much, but I like pushing the evidence a bit too much. it makes me more interested in what's going on, and this is my view. Again, not a full answer. About the taste of a hippo, I never tasted a hippo. I never tasted an elephant. And another very good reading material is a marvelous sad book. Maybe some of you read it. It is called Circles in the Forest. It's about South Africa in modern time, logging and living alongside elephants and eating elephants. It's a sad story because it brings back our ecological crisis that we are running. I think that it's very difficult to us living in the modern in the modern world to have an idea about how taste worked in the past. I think that we lost many of our senses, taste included. So I don't know, but again, the archaeological evidence shows clearly that people were eating hippos as well. I guess they managed with the taste, and I'm sure that they appreciated the fat. Sorry for the long answer.
No, that's fine. Thank you so much.
Ran, are you okay to answer a couple more questions? Because I guess it's getting quite late for you, isn't it?
No, it's 8 o'clock in the evening here. It's not too late. I'm fine. Go ahead.
Okay, we've got 2 more questions in the chat, and then Larry, you can ask your question, and then I guess we can finish it there. So Nida says, thank you for a fascinating talk. Do you think the bone hand axes were predominantly symbolic or regularly used for processing? Are they as sharp and strong as stone axes, or much more brittle and fragile?
Well, again, this is dealt with in the debate in PNAS that you can read. Usually, people were thinking that bone hand axes were not functional, were not practical. It is not easy to shape a bone like a hand axe. Bone is not as workable as flint or stone in order to be shaped. It is not as sharp and durable as stone in order to be used, but it could be used. And again, when evidence of use of these hippo bone bifaces were presented, I was not shocked. I mean, there's no reason why it won't be both practical and what we call symbolic. I don't like the word symbolic, but I see no reason why an item won't be both practical and useful and meaningful in many other terms. So going back to the question, bone bifaces were made only at sites where stone hand axes were found as well, and there's no evidence of lack of suitable stone in order to produce more stone bifaces. So it doesn't seem that people made bone bifaces because there was any kind of shortage in stone. People in the past made all kinds of items from elephant limb bones, not only bifaces. But the striking similarity between the bone bifaces and the stone bifaces, I think, put them together. And again, I don't think that stone bifaces, stone hand axes, were only practical. They were also meaningful for the people for many other reasons. So I try to put them together. I hope I made myself clear, although the situation is not very clear. But again, it's all embedded together.
Okay, cool. The next question is from Shalom Leaf. It says, do we have anthropological evidence of use of animal bone tools in connection with processing of meat of some of same species and having symbolic functions?
Well, we have a saying in Hebrew that anthropological literature is like the Bible. And we like the Bible a lot, and you can find everything in the Bible. So you can find everything in anthropological literature. What you have to be
thank you.
You have to be careful with the way you use it. And And the short answer is yes. There are evidence, from Arctic localities where bone flakes were used in cutting mammoths in frozen situations, and there are examples of the use of bone tools in working animal bones. And now with the advent of all kinds of new technologies that allow scholars to identify the animal species that bone tools are made of, I believe that there will be more correlation between bones that were used for the treatment of specific animals, because I think that life was much more complicated than we see it. I'll give you an example from the Innu or from other Arctic groups. They process specific animal taxa only with bone tools made from the specific taxa, from this specific taxa. There are examples from archaeological sites in Sri Lanka where they were hunting monkeys only with arrows made from monkey bones. So I think that the future is ahead of us, and I think that if we be curious and we take into account all kinds of possibility, we'll find many connections like that. I'll give you just another example that came to mind from the Innu and the work of Adrian Tanner that I mentioned before, and you are welcome to read the book. The Innu make leashes from hides of specific animals, and they use the leashes to carry specific species. They use only leashes made from this very species. They don't carry hunted animal with a leash made of a hide of another animal. So I'm not saying that the Innu is a parallel to the Paleolithic, not at all. I'm saying that the intimate relationships and the care and the respect is something that we should keep in mind and take into account that more complex relationships might have taken place in the past. I'm done with this question.
Okay, cool. So Larry, last question.
Yeah, thank you, Ran. That was, I'd let me say it's very healthy to occasionally have somebody who's really provocative and pushing us outside of our comfort zone, particularly comfort zone based on efficiency and quantifying everything. My question's about the end of the Achille and the disappearance of the large hand axes. And you say maybe it's because the early humans had effectively put pressure on the populations of elephants, and they became scarce. And you'd be well aware that in the African context, the transition from the Achille into the Middle Stone Age is now being looked at, particularly from the perspective of climate change, and that increasing aridity, loss of standing water sources had led to changes in the fauna, particularly those who could adapt well to drier conditions. And the human response technologically was to use hafted technologies in terms of increasing mobility. I hadn't thought about what you've been saying in terms of the loss of elephants from overhunting might be an element of this, but I'm not aware that elephant populations are also declining at this time. I know there's change in elephant species, but elephants remain there. And just sort of a personal note, I've had the privilege of working in a part of Zambia where there are tens of thousands of elephants still on the ground. And I have great respect for them. They are quite frightening as well. They can be, they can certainly be dangerous. But from the archaeological perspective, they seem to have been continuous in that region, give or take some climate change, back through into the Middle Stone Age and the later Stone Age. So I don't know why then, in your theory, would they have dropped the making of these large bifaces for butchery?
Well, Africa is indeed quite a different ball game, but I think it can fit into the story quite well. And I'll tell you why. In the past, in the Pleistocene, there were 6 different animals, elephant species in Africa, and only 2 survived till this day. There was certainly a decline in number of elephants in Africa throughout time. And there are many, many papers presenting that. So elephants did remain in Africa and in parts of Asia, but it's nothing like the Pleistocene. In the Pleistocene, you would see herds and herds of elephants running through Africa. And again, 6 species were present in the Pleistocene, only 2 survived. Then if you go to specific places in Africa, like in Lower Paleolithic, if you follow the works of Rick Potts documented in the last years a transformation from the Acheulean to the Middle Stone Age, when there was a shift in technology, and there was a very similar shift in animal taxa. In the Middle Stone Age in Lower Paleolithic, there are no elephants in the archaeological record. So there might have been elephants in Africa, but most probably not in Lower Paleolithic. And if there were elephant survivors at Lower Paleolithic, it seems that early humans didn't hunt them and eat them. And on top of that, they changed their toolkits from bifaces to levallois. So it might be that in some pockets, or in some habitats in Africa, similar change might have taken place. And again, there is a change, there is a major decline in the number, in the size, and in species of elephants in Africa. And again, in my wild imagination, maybe it has to do that early humans actually witnessed the disappearance of elephants. They might have witnessed the decline in elephant presence in order to make a change. But again, this is my line of thinking, and I still have to work on that. But I'm trying to, my best knowledge is from the Levant, the southern Levant, where I live and work. And I believe that in this region, it works very nice. But again, if I try to follow the disappearance of bifaces globally, I think it has to do with the disappearance of mega herbivores. But again, this is my thinking, and I'm open to criticism, to suggestions, to debates, and again, I will be more than happy to have this conversation in a better context, like I said with John in the past. I mean.
I look forward to joining you with that beer.
And you are welcome in Israel, Larry, at any time, as we talked in the past. But you haven't come yet. John has been here quite several times.
All right, I'm coming.
Good.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Everyone else is welcomed as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Larry, for that question, and thank you, Ran, for the great answer as well. So thanks everyone for coming, and thank you, Ran, for the very interesting talk. I hope I will see everyone back again next week for a talk on human dispersals into Southwest Asia. So yes, thanks everyone, and goodbye for now.
Thanks for having me.
Yes,
bye-bye.
Thank you for coming. Bye.
I hope to see you in the future.
Yes, you too. Bye-bye.